Have you ever had one of those days where nothing dramatic is happening, but everything feels heavier than it should? Answering a text feels like effort. Something simple feels like effort. Even small decisions feel like they require energy you don't quite have. And the confusing part is your life might look fine from the outside. Nothing is falling apart, but internally, everything feels like it takes more effort than it used to, than you remember it taking. If that feeling sounds familiar, stay with me. Effort isn't always physical. When we think about effort, we usually imagine physical work, lifting bags of cement, mowing the lawn, lifting something heavy, running, moving fast. But there's another kind of effort that people don't talk that much about. Mental effort, emotional effort, the effort of constantly thinking about things, the effort of holding yourself together, the effort of managing how you appear to others. That kind of effort doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but it does accumulate quietly. And over time, it can make ordinary movements feel surprisingly heavy. I remember one afternoon where I had something incredibly simple to do. A short message. All I had to do was send a short message. Not a difficult situation, not a conflict, just a normal message. And I sat there staring at the screen for like 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Rewriting the sentence, deleting it, rewriting it again. And eventually, I realized something strange. The message wasn't difficult. My mind was just exhausted. That moment made me realize how often effort isn't about the task, it's about the internal load behind it. Constant evaluation drains energy. I mean, some people move quickly through life, very quickly. They react, they respond, they move on. But if you're someone who tends to evaluate everything, you might be running dozens of internal calculations every day. What does this mean? Did I say that the right way? Should I respond differently? How will this affect things later? Evaluation feels thoughtful, but evaluation also consumes energy. And if your brain never fully stops evaluating, everything starts to feel like effort. The invisible work of holding things together, some people carry a quiet responsibility inside themselves, not because someone asked them to, but because they've decided that's their role, to stay composed, to stay thoughtful, to stay responsible, to keep things stable, you know? But from the outside, this looks like maturity, but internally, it requires constant attention, and attention requires energy. I once had a day where I felt strangely exhausted, you know? Nothing big had happened, no crisis, no conflict, just a normal day. But I felt drained. And later that night, I realized something. My brain had spent the entire day thinking about 10 different things at once. You know, squirrels on the treadmill inside just running and running and running, planning, anticipating, analyzing, replaying conversations. No wonder I was tired. I hadn't stopped thinking all day long. What if the feeling that everything takes effort isn't a flaw? What if it's information? Sometimes effort, it increases because your mind is trying to process something new, something shifting, something you haven't fully understood yet. Your brain, it's reorganizing. Your perspective is adjusting. And adjustment requires energy. Just like working your muscles during growth. Trying to force yourself forward can make it worse. When things start feeling heavy, many people respond the same way. They push harder, more discipline, more productivity, more effort. But if the weight you're feeling is mental overload, pushing harder often makes the exhaustion deeper because the system never gets a moment to reset. It's always on. There's no off switch. Thoughtful people often experience this. Something interesting happens when you talk privately with thoughtful people. Many of them, they quietly admit the same thing. Life sometimes feels heavier than expected. Not because they dislike life, but because they're thinking about it constantly, observing patterns, reflecting on choices, trying to understand themselves. That level of reflection can be meaningful, but once again, it also requires energy. I once noticed something simple. After spending hours thinking about problems, if I stepped outside for a walk without trying to solve anything, something inside me would change. Not instantly, but gradually, My brain, it would slow down. The squirrels would go on lunch hour. The pressure would loosen. And the world would start to feel lighter again. Not because the problems had disappeared, but because my mind stopped gripping them so tightly. Maybe the answer isn't more effort. Sometimes the question isn't, how do I push harder? Sometimes the better question is, what am I carrying that I haven't put down yet? Mental loops, unfinished business, unfinished worries, invisible expectations. When those things pile up, everything feels heavier. Not because you're weak, but because your mind is overloaded. If everything feels like effort lately, that doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong. It might mean your mind has been working overtime for longer than you realized, trying to understand things, trying to make you feel safe, trying to figure things out, trying to hold everything together. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do is to stop trying to solve everything at once. Slow down. Let your mind breathe and notice what actually matters. Because when the internal weight lifts, life often feels lighter again. Not because the world changed, but because you did. I'm Scott Stewart, and you're not crazy.